when I was a teenager, I got a seasonal job at a Six Flags amusement park. It was sort of the big employer in our area, which I guess shouldn't be a surprise. However, it was only open during the spring, summer, and early fall, which made it a perfect place for high school students to get their jobs at. Now, this was a long time ago. I don't know if Six Flags operates now like they did back then. But back then, at closing time, they did this thing they called the security sweep. The park was basically in a big circle. So to the right of the entrance, the security would sweep the park, basically forcing the customers, or guests as we were supposed to call them, but I think it's rude to charge your guests admission, counterclockwise around the park, right back to the entrance. The only reason I bring this up is to explain to you what it was like when I worked there. I just happened to work at this ice cream parlor, which was the absolutely last place in that counterclockwise sweep to be reached by the security and customers. So, because the park also wants to make as much money as they can, we were the absolutely last place to close. So after closing, we still had to clean. Plus, I had a drawer I had to take down to the cash drawer. I was absolutely one of the last people to leave the park at night. And unlike others who worked in the store with me, I didn't have a car. I had to walk to the dressing room, change out the clothes, and then walk out the back of the park to the bus stop. If you have never been in a big place like Six Flags after close, you probably don't know how creepy it can be by yourself. But at least you know that you are in a huge and relatively safe place. Not only is it really difficult for someone to break into an amusement park, there is security there at all times. Even the employee parking lot was caged in. But for the employees, such as myself, who took the bus to work, we had to walk through a small back area to a small bus stop with a bench and a light. Very few bus riders worked at night, though, because the buses in the area did not run any later than 7 p.m., so that probably makes you wonder why I was a closing employee. Well, it was the only hours they would give me. So when I was done, I would go out and call my stepdad on the telephone. He would be sleeping at the time, but he would come and pick me up and take me home before going back to sleep. This was a very late night during the summer. I can't remember exactly when it was, though. But the park was late getting closed. Tons of people rushed into the ice cream parlor at the end. We were busier then than we were any other time of the day. Once the park closed, they sent me to the money counting station earlier, and then I still had to come back to the ice cream parlor in order to get it cleaned up. It was easily 2 o'clock in the morning by the time that I got changed and finally got out of the park. I called my stepdad, and he told me that he was on his way. So I began walking out of the employee parking area so I could head over to the bus stop. It was creepy as hell because there was no one in the locker room when I was in there. There were no cars in the parking lot. To be in such a large area, normally teeming with people, and to be so empty, was just unlike anything I can explain. I walked down the sidewalk to the bus stop. It was nothing more than a bench with one of those wind and rain guards on it. There was a dim light in the little cubby or whatever. I went in there, sat down on the bench, and waited. The park was only about a 15-minute drive from my house, and that was around the time that it took for my stepdad to get there and pick me up. So I just waited. The normal amount of time passed. My stepdad did not show up yet. I didn't think too much about it at first. A few minutes here and there is nothing. I'm going to try and explain how this worked. The bus stop was not down on the regular road. To get to it, you turned off the road into the back of the park. The road went slowly up the hill, stopping in a circle right where the bus stop was. So technically there was no reason for anyone to be in that area unless they were coming to work at the park. More time passed, and my stepdad still hadn't shown up. He may have been a little late once or twice, but more and more time kept passing, and he hadn't shown up yet. This was in the early 1990s, so I didn't have a cell phone. The payphone I used to call him was in the locker room. I wouldn't be able to get back in there, because the door I exited was locked. So I couldn't call him and see why he hadn't arrived yet. All I could do was sit there and wait until he showed up. After waiting a while, looking down the road, I noticed something a little strange. There was a figure walking up on the sidewalk toward the bus stop. At first, the figure was something I could barely make out. It wasn't a really long road, but it was dark. And although I thought it was really weird that someone was out there walking so late, I didn't really put a lot of thought into it. But the more I kept waiting for my stepdad to show up, the more attention I paid to the figure walking toward me. I noticed that it was moving pretty slowly. He was also limping as he slowly walked closer and closer. He was wearing a long, dirty trench coat. Even though it was very hot, I didn't really want to stare at him. But he was so odd. And when he got under some light, he looked even weirder. I mean, he may have been a homeless guy, and I guess he passed as one. If he wasn't, I watched as he stopped, and he picked up a handful of gravel from the side of the road. I found that to be really odd. As he got closer to the bus stop, I watched him make a sudden movement. I was not sure what the movement was meant to be, until something hard hit the glass on the side of the bus stop. He had thrown a rock at it. I jumped. The next rock nearly struck me. "Hey, stop that!" I yelled. "You almost hit me!" He got closer and threw again. This time the rock hit me right in the forehead. It broke skin and was incredibly painful. I ran behind the bus stop as he kept throwing the rocks at me. As he got closer, I noticed he was wearing a rubber mask that he likely had from part of a Halloween costume. He kept throwing the rock, hitting the glass. I then saw him draw something that looked like a knife out of his jacket pocket, and I felt my blood turn cold. The guy was distracted, though, because a set of headlights coming up the road. I noticed it was my stepdad in his pickup truck. The guy turned and looked at the truck, and then he dropped the leftover rocks and he ran off through the trees by the side of the road. My stepdad showed up to pick me up. I jumped in the truck. "Go, drive!"
What's wrong?
"Just go." I explained what happened on the way back. It was such a surreal experience. I found out my stepdad accidentally fell back to sleep after I called. He apologized to me, but it didn't matter. He arrived in time to help me. Night security here. I stopped an active burglary at one of our accounts. I checked the whole exterior of the building, no cars or signs of people other than an AC that had fallen to the ground. It was windy and the wood it was supported by looked kinda old, so I figured it was a natural fall. Just to be sure, I did an extra check around the building, making sure to put my flashlight in every window. Nothing. Go back to put the AC unit back on its stand and it made a very loud cracking noise. Suddenly, someone started walking into the room and had asked who I was, so I assumed it was a business owner in the building there overnight, since the area where the AC had fallen was way too small for anyone to crawl through. Well, I was dead wrong about that when they got close enough to me that I could see they were wearing a full ski mask like straight out of a movie. They pushed the AC unit back out and down to my feet and started climbing through the hole directly into me, so I took off across the street, called the cops, and he ran the opposite way. Police arrived, closed off the entire major street I saw him run to, brought a police negotiator and 3 K9 units. Guess it was a slow night. Every cop wanted action. Turns out, guy hadn't even gotten away with anything, and none of the offices inside even looked like someone had gone through them, so I must have gotten there within a minute of him. Anyways, only a month worth of seeing that guy crawl through the hole directly towards me in my dreams. I worked in a hostel that had a kitchen dining area that was a separate building from the dormitories. The building was used as a hospital and prison before it was renovated for other uses, and there were many recorded deaths there for many reasons before it was an accommodation facility. Last job for anyone on night shift was to check the kitchen and lock it up until morning. I had done this 100 times before this night, and had no experiences with any spirits or scary moments despite many reports from patrons, some who came especially to look for them. I did the formal checks, but while locking up from outside, I froze. I could feel something watching me in a way that was completely frightening. I looked around, used my light to look around, but all I could do was shake on the spot. It took me about a minute to lock up when it takes 10 seconds or less. My skin actually crawled the whole time. It was dark and my eyes wouldn't adjust to anything. I rushed to the dorm buildings when I locked up and took some time to settle in, but eventually fell asleep. In the morning, 6 hours later, I unlocked it all with people waiting to make their morning food, and it seemed normal again. Until one patron came and asked me for the big knife we leave in there for people to use. It is one of the night shift person's duties to check that the knives, among other items, were accounted for on lockup. I had checked and ticked all the items in the knife block as there, and I would have noticed if one was missing the night before. I found it under a tree close to the main door about an hour later. This is pretty much the only experience I've ever had that I would call proper scary.